Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. It is Kaye and Eric from Freewyld and Freewyld Foundry again. Eric, what is going on?
Hello. I'm excited for today. It's going to be a powerful podcast, something that you and I have been talking about for a while. So why don't you introduce to everybody what we're going to chat about today?
Yes, this has been a long time coming. And I think that you finally codified everything that we believe in and what we have seen to be true in terms of what makes STRs successful into a really elegant framework. So you created a really brilliant LinkedIn post about it, but we wanted to get this to a wider audience because this is more important than ever. So we're covering the 4 non-negotiables of STR success in today's landscape because everything is changing so quickly.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So I've been in the short-term rental space now. It seems like we've gone through like 4 major changes in the industry, like seasons, if you will. And I feel like we're in one of those new seasons of running successful short-term rentals. I feel like every other year, Jasper and I have been preaching to the world that like what worked a couple of years ago is not going to work today and grow in short-term rental business. And I think this is really important for us to share because I don't know if you've noticed this, but all over Instagram, social media, you hear a lot of people talking about how Airbnb and short-term rentals are dead as a business model and all of that. I completely disagree with that. We're seeing the complete opposite with our clients, with our properties. I wanted to kind of take a step back and I wanted to bring my opinion into this conversation. There was a really big podcast that went live, that went viral of 2 individuals talking about how this industry is kind of crashing. And I wanted to take a step back and I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, why are we seeing the results that we're seeing in Freewyld? And why are we seeing the results that we're seeing with our clients that, are all around the world at this point, 1,500 listings? We have a good data set to understand that short-term rentals and hospitality is still a thriving industry and business, but it has changed to, you can't just get into the industry anymore, list any type of property on Airbnb and hope for the best, right? That doesn't work. And it never really has worked. It worked for me in the beginning 9 years ago when people were first figuring out Airbnb. It didn't matter where the property was. It didn't matter how it looked. Didn't matter customer service, nothing. Just mattered that it was an Airbnb. Now I feel like the industry has matured enough. And again, the whole reason for us talking about this is what we see as service providers and operators of what's driving true success in the short-term rental space. And I also believe that this flows into boutique hotels and unique spaces and stuff like that. We're calling this the 4 non-negotiables. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into brand and product. That's the first non-negotiable.
Yeah, this reminds me, coming up in internet marketing over the last 2 decades, there's always a ton of conversations around like email marketing is dead, or like, oh, if you just got into putting up a simple landing page and simple display ads back in the early 2000s, like those people got rich really, really easily. So there's this sense of FOMO and there's this sense of like, oh, this isn't fair. This is way harder than it used to be. But to me, this is a good thing. Our consumers, our guests, have more options than ever. And it raises the bar for everybody. If you're willing to be the CEO that will elevate your business and pay attention to these 4 factors, you will succeed. With all of the data that we're seeing, all of our clients are succeeding beyond market averages, beyond the trends, beyond travel demand softening. Even with all of those headwinds and this new situation that we're all operating in, success is still entirely within reach. You just have to know what to pay attention to. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
Eric, do you want to introduce the 4 non-negotiables?
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote a post on this maybe 2 months ago on the 4 non-negotiables in the short-term rental space and hospitality space, and a CEO or COO of a pretty large hospitality brand that's opening up a new really cool hotel in Canada reached out to me because of this post, and he wanted to connect and learn more about what we're doing with Freewyld and Wild Mode and the whole thing. We had this awesome conversation, and he pretty much said to me in a very pleasant and professional way, Eric, we've been doing this in the hospitality space for years, right? He's like, these 4 non-negotiables are very powerful, but no one's talking about it in the short-term rental space. But this is how the most successful hotel brands succeeds. I thought I was this genius coming up with these 4 pillars, but it's just recognizing the pattern, right? And that's something that I've gotten really good at, is like recognizing the pattern of success, right? So I'm studying like what's working for us, what's working for our clients that are really thriving in these markets around the world, And then also in the short-term rental space, the top companies and hosts and brands, what are they doing? What do they have that's really driving the success? So I'm just noticing the pattern. So the 4 non-negotiables are: number 1 is brand and product. Number 2 is unreasonable hospitality. Number 3 is revenue mastery. And number 4 is operational excellence. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll run through that again: brand and product, unreasonable hospitality, revenue mastery, and operational excellence. Obviously, we're borrowing some words and kind of putting all this together. I'm just trying to word it to understand, like, what do these companies have in place that they're focused on all the time? It's not, I set it up once, I have it, now I can move on. It's something that is like their core, what would you call that? Like their, not values, but it's drives their company.
Exactly. It's the levers that you can pull and continue to pull to create more success. And like you said, success leaves clues. So when we're looking at all of these different companies that are seeing outsized success, we're noticing that in these 4 areas, they're doing it different. They're investing more into it. They have functional areas of their team set up to manage each of these 4 pillars. And they're not just ignoring them or setting them and forgetting them, which is so important. So let's go through the 4 non-negotiables just briefly. We're actually going to do a series. This first episode in the series is this one that you're listening to right now. And we're going to dive deep into brand and products, like Eric mentioned. We're going to have 3 more episodes. We'll talk in great depth about unreasonable hospitality, revenue mastery, and operational excellence. But I think it would be helpful if we just give a short, maybe 2-sentence description of what each of these mean so that we can have this big picture in our mind as we're going through the series.
Yeah. So, I mean, why don't you dive into it? What does brand and product mean to you? Because obviously you lead brand and product for our company. So like, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you see that playing out with what we built in Freewyld?
Yep. So brand and product is acknowledging that at the very baseline, when you bring something to market, it needs to be worth marketing. You can put lipstick on a pig as much as you want, but if you don't have something that is markedly different, that looks different, feels different, and has kind of carved out its own spot in the market, you're going to get lost in the noise, in the sea of competition. So it's defining what your overarching messaging is going to be around your brand so that you can live that out loud in every single touch point that guests come into contact with.
Love it. Love it. Let's leave that there because we're going to dive into brand and product, which I'm very excited about because that's where we started with Freewyld. Unreasonable Hospitality. Everyone in the industry, if you haven't read the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, read the book, reread it. We're rereading it right now as a company. The entire team is going through it this month, and we're sharing our notes and implementing into both of our companies here. But Unreasonable Hospitality, I just freaking love that term. I love the book. I love the mindset. I love how our industry is really starting to pick this up because that is one of the most challenging parts of the short-term rental space is really implementing unreasonable hospitality, high-level hospitality, because as we know, hotels, they have all their assets in one location where short-term rentals are spread out across the city or multiple markets, and it's very challenging to over-deliver on that. But what I'm recognizing and what we're driving forward in Freewyld is the best companies, short-term rental companies, the best short-term rental hosts. Doesn't mean that you have to have hundreds of units. Like, you know, my friend Christy Wolf, who has, I think, 7 of the most popular Airbnb units in the world, she from day one has been driving unreasonable hospitality. So I truly believe that unreasonable hospitality now is the standard across the board for all short-term rental properties. We'll get into that, I believe, next week. Revenue mastery. So this is a pillar that I've noticed that once we started focusing on it in Freewyld, we started skyrocketing not just the revenue of understanding our pricing strategy and how to compete with the market and how to outcompete the market, but then also our profitability. Right. So it's like really mastering our numbers. In the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, he talks about one of his first early jobs in the restaurant industry was learning controlling in the restaurant business, being P&Ls and all that stuff. And he was able to bring that back to 11 Madison Park and really drive a profitable business at the end of the day. So we're going to get into that. Obviously, we run revenue management at a high level. We see the importance of that, but we're going to dive into that at a later date. And then lastly is operational excellence. The reason why I'm bringing this in is I'm noticing that this is I think the second most difficult part of running a short-term rental business is operational excellence. Same challenge is, your assets are spread across multiple different areas, but without operational excellence, you can't deliver unreasonable hospitality. If you can't deliver unreasonable hospitality, you're not going to master your revenue, right? With all of that, if that doesn't align with your brand and product, you didn't really focus on your brand and product. So I'm noticing it's a flywheel of all of these things have to be focused on at any given time within your business. Let's dive into brand and product. Let's use Freewyld as an example. This is how you and I started working together. And it's kind of crazy. How long ago was that?
I'm terrible with dates, but 2 years maybe?
2 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of crazy what we've done in 2 years, right? Like we built this brand from just an idea to now we have Freewyld brand, which is just growing and it's just incredible. Now we have Freewyld Foundry. We have this awesome team, but it all started with an idea. Let me start with this and then you can get into the technical side. For everyone who's listening, I really believe that to drive a successful short-term rental company today, we can't rely on being a air quote Airbnb host, right? We have to develop a identity of who we are as a company, what our properties, who our company serves and what our properties deliver, right? We have to develop something to separate ourselves from all the competition. Now, going back to where we started with this podcast, I'm hearing all this negative talk that the market is crashed, the short-term rental market's crashing. I truly believe it's the people who jumped into Airbnb thinking that it would be a good set it and forget it type of model. Those are the ones that are struggling. But the ones that are focusing on brand and product and something that separates them from just being an Airbnb host, they're the ones that are really thriving. So let's dive into it. Let's use Freewyld as an example. Like, where did all this start? Because I know we have multiple different avenues here with Freewyld.
Yeah. And just to drive that point home, can you imagine if your favorite e-commerce brand, Eric likes to wear work clothing, but can you imagine if they completely relied on selling through eBay and that was their business model? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, like if they just sold on eBay, they didn't have a logo, they didn't have the store, they didn't have the story behind their brand. It's a full experience buying clothes, wearing work right now. It's like, it's a full experience, right? It makes me feel different when I'm wearing these clothes.
If you boil it down, a brand is a promise. A brand is a promise about what this experience is going to deliver. And then you have to live up to that in every dimension, which makes it kind of big and convoluted and it kind of touches everything in a way. So if you're confused about brand, it is not your fault. It is just the nature of brand building. Literally every touch point, every moment that somebody comes into contact with our brand is an opportunity to build our brand. But to be able to do that well, you have to follow a process similar to what we did when we started. Before I came on to the Freewyld team full-time, I was a brand strategist for multiple different companies. So I was working with different industries, and the process that I defined works really, really well. And it's essentially a long interview process to get everything out of the founder's brain and then codify it into what the brand stands for. So what are the brand values? What's the brand story? What's the cultural tension that your brand is speaking to? And to make this more clear, let me give you Freewylds. You tell a story often about a trip that you took with your friends to Utah. You climbed a mountain. You guys were in this beautiful cabin, all sitting around the fire, and you realized that everybody was just staring at their cell phones. Cultural tension that we're living through right now that we all kind of hate. And our brand story is the antidote to that. So part of building a brand is deciding not only who are you for? So like, who's your ideal guest avatar? What do they care about? And how are you going to deliver that? But what do you stand against? Where are your edges so that you can add emotion into the story? You can add natural tension into the story that makes people sit up and pay attention. So it's really a process of asking yourself, what am I promising to deliver? And then how can I make sure that I live up to that promise and exceed that promise at every single point? My website, my guest messaging, my properties themselves, anything extra, any amenities that I add. And then you have to continue to do that and continue to focus on that week in, week out, month in, month out. What was your side of the experience? What was that process like?
What I like about this conversation right now is I still remember so vivid to me the vision I had of what I wanted to create with Freewyld, right? And it came from the pain points for myself being a traveler, right? So quick background story, my wife and I, during COVID and all that stuff, we got out of the area and we just started staying at different Airbnbs and different boutique hotels. And this is after years of me running short-term rentals myself. And I started noticing the things that I was desiring that I could not find on the platform. And no matter how hard I looked, or no matter what property I booked that I thought was going to deliver these things, they always dropped the ball or always missed the mark. So as I was traveling and staying at these properties, I'm like, man, I am obsessed with detail. Like when I walk into a nice hotel or a great restaurant or a great short-term rental, literally this cup right now was from one of my favorite restaurants down the block. I'm like looking underneath, seeing who makes it. I'm like, I need these at home, right? I get obsessed with details, and I'm like, I want to develop my properties. I want to be obsessed with what we create and what we put in the properties, from the colors we choose, the feeling of the furniture, the products that we clean the house with, the soaps. Like I want it all to be intentional, because I remember booking this house and we walked into this property and it was a beautiful house, huge mountain house, gorgeous view, but they had all this like the typical live, laugh, love stuff and like cheap IKEA stuff and like the bright white lights. And I could not settle down and enjoy myself. I'm like, I had enough of this. I want to create properties where we're obsessed with details and the people that stay there can feel the soul of this property, right? And like that anchors a feeling. And I'm like, okay, I want to create that. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I want to create that. And then the story, me sitting around the fireplace and all my friends are on their phones. And I'm like, why are we doing this? And I grabbed everyone's phone, threw it in a box, said, we're going in wild mode. I'm like, oh, that's the next thing I want to deliver to my guests, is the freedom to disconnect from the world and just be present at our properties. How do we do that? All right, let's just create wild mode and like invite people into the space, right? As you're checking into these other properties and you start noticing, little things are breaking down and like they're overlooking details, you're like, all right, we have to be obsessed with operations, right? We need these things to be rolling like a machine, because you go to the best hotels, they know every single little detail in that property. Everything is fixed, or they're working on it, or they let you know before you even get there of the problem, right? How do you do that in short-term rentals? So I had all those ideas coming to me, and I'm like, Kaye, I need you to build this thing. Here's some ideas. Here's some Pinterest boards, like all these things. And then you came back with, hey, this is Freewyld. I was like, let's go. Breaking all that down, like, I guess the steps there for me as like, the visionary behind it is I noticed what I was seeking and what the market needed. And I noticed that people would desire this. So that's a great business model to develop, right? And it's something I can see myself doing forever. For the visionaries who are listening, my first step was to collect those thoughts and ideas and the journey of the guests into a document and just like brain dump into there. And then I'm a visual person. So then I went out and I spent days and days and days on Pinterest, just pinning all these photos of beautiful properties and colors. And that's how I found Rourke, because I fell in love with their story. And then I found somebody, yourself, who can take all this and turn it into a physical thing. Right. So what happens there? I gave you all that stuff. What came out of that for you or for us as a company?
Oh, man. And this is so typical. Founders, especially visionary founders, have so many different ideas that there's just a lot of noise. And you even had a strong direction that you wanted to take. And that's not even always the case. Like sometimes it's like, oh, we want to give people a space where they can unplug, but also at the same time, we're going to do this other thing and we're going to do this other thing at the same time. So it often takes somebody in my seat, somebody who is acting as the brand strategist, to find what I like to call like a red thread through the stories. Like what parts of this is related and what parts of it is extra. So it's really a curating process. I like to say I don't ever create a brand for somebody. It's more of a mirroring process. So you start with asking yourself as the founder or as the leadership team, what's important to us? What do we believe to be true about the world? What is true about our properties or our location? And finding the one piece that you want to build the rest of the brand around. Because once you have that kind of core story, that can be really useful. I use a framework in my work called brand archetypes. So brand archetypes are these patterns that show up in literature, in movies, in brand. We can tie our brand story to one of these types. It's not a perfect science, but our brain recognizes patterns. We talked about that in the beginning. You're recognizing the patterns of success. And the same thing is happening whenever we encounter a brand. We're trying to ask ourselves, what else is this like? So we need to decide what that core story is so that we aren't confusing people. And then once we know what that is, and for Freewyld, using this brand archetype framework, we are both an explorer brand. So we are inviting people to basically be present, to choose their own path, to explore what actually makes them feel fulfilled and excited. And then we're also a creator brand. So we have this really high level of attention and intention when it comes to design and just the experience, the multi-sensory experience that our properties provide. That's not going to be the same for yours. Maybe you are focused on families and connection. Maybe you're focused on more on adventure. Maybe you're more focused on like more of a party lifestyle. Like there's all of these different patterns that continue to show up. Might need to dive more into that on a later episode.
Yeah.
But again, decide what's important to you and then start working to bring every touch point in alignment with that. So as you are brain dumping all of these ideas to me, I'm starting to think about like, okay, if this is what's important, what colors psychologically tell that story? What type of language psychologically tells that story? What like graphic elements or photographs help us tell that story? And it's being a steward of that story and making sure that everything fits so that people have that emotional, unconscious, like yes moment with our brand, which is what we're looking for. And that yes moment creates a moat, or what Warren Buffett calls pricing power, meaning people are willing to pay more for our product than they are for others.
Okay, a couple of things there. I love that. One part that you just mentioned is like developing what's important to you and your brand and company. But also I would add to that is, what do you enjoy the most in your business? So meaning when we were when I was thinking at this time, when I was developing out the Freewyld idea, you know, I was kind of on this journey of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. Right. And I was looking at all different types of business models. And when I say business models, like, you know, do I go out and rent apartment buildings and then re-rent them out on Airbnb? Do I start a property management company? Like all this stuff. And what I recognize is like, yes, everything we just said, that came up for me. And then also I asked myself, I'm like, can I do this for the rest of my life, regardless of the size of the business, and enjoy it? Right. And I'm like, hell yes. Every time I go up to Freewyld, I'm freaking in heaven. I love it. I love the properties. I love the location. I love the guests. Like I love the problem solving. And I'm like, I just want to do more of this all the time. Right. So I think that's really important too, is like develop something that is close to your heart that you will enjoy doing forever. It doesn't have to be your life's passion. You don't have to cure the world of X, Y, and Z. You just enjoy the thing. I have friends that enjoy corporate housing, right? And like he loves that business and it's so successful for him. Corporate housing does not sound fun or sexy to me, but for him, he enjoys it and he's extremely successful at it, right? And then lastly, you were talking about like, what are the colors and images and all this stuff that tell that story of that brand and that product? The other part to this is like, what is the feeling that your brand and product, and by the way, people, when we talk about product, we're talking about your properties, you know, like, of course, your properties, your service, like all of that, right? What is the feeling that you want your guests, investors, property owners to feel when they interact with your brand? Right. Yep. So like we put a lot of effort into that. We put a lot of time, a lot of money into building our direct booking website, all the touch points, because we want you to feel as a guest when you land on our property, immediately you're transported into the mountains, right? You're transported into wild mode. Like you feel it. Right. And it comes down to everything, again, to the glasses that we use, to the smells that we have in the property, to the furniture, to the colors that we chose. Right. So I think that's really important too, that people don't talk about. People think brand is a logo, right? where
Right.
I think it's a feeling. And then you mentioned something earlier. It's a feeling. And then it's also
It's a promise. It's
a
telling
promise.
people what to expect.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so important. I want to underline what you said about product really quickly. If we're in the STR industry, like we are, our properties have to live up to that promise. So you can't have a brand that speaks to like really joyful moments. Like maybe you're tapping into that feeling of being a kid again and just like frolicking in a forest or something. If your property is in the middle of a city and it's boring, that doesn't fit the promise. Product in terms of what your properties are and look like and include is a really important piece of this because you can't tell the story without it.
I'm so happy you brought that up because I was going to mention that we talk to operators all around the world, and we're talking to someone yesterday who has a grand vision of what they want to build, and they have a lot of properties and they're doing millions of dollars in bookings. But when I look at their properties do not match their brand or their vision at all. And I'm like, why do you have this property? And I hear this a lot with property managers or co-hosts that are out there, is that they have a problem with the owner. The owner will not invest more money into the property. They won't fix it up. Why do you still have that part of your portfolio? Let those go. I'm actually going to put a post on LinkedIn about this, about the property that we were trying to buy in Big Bear, and like all the properties that we passed on that were great real estate investments that did not match our brand of Freewyld. And like we're holding that line, which is super frustrating because we want more properties, but we are holding the line that we are buying old cabin communities in nature locations that are within a 2-hour drive of a metro area. We find hotels, we find single family homes, we find land, we find, RV parks, all this stuff, but it doesn't match and does not fit with the essence of our Freewyld brand. So we're patient with that process, right? I wanted to talk about that too, because it's your property. And, sometimes you have to let go of properties, and maybe if you own them, maybe they're not the best short-term rental, right? Or if it is, maybe it's outside your brand. But I think everyone should just like take a step back, look at your properties. If you're a property manager, look at the owners. Are they in alignment with your brand? Will they make the investments into the property that that property needs to drive maximum results, right? And to align with your brands. It's okay letting properties go because you're going to attract in the ones that are closer to your brand once you develop this identity.
That's such a great point. I could continue to geek out about branding, and I feel like maybe we should have a part 2 at some point here to dive even more into the details of everything that we developed for Freewyld with the Wild Mode box and Wildwood Park and all of those different amazing examples. But we are running out of time. So tune back in for our next episode in this series, Unreasonable Hospitality. Thank you so much for this conversation, Eric. This was super fun.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this, and maybe we'll write about this more on LinkedIn. And if you guys aren't on our email list, join our email. How do people join our email list now?
Freewildfoundry.com. There's a few different places. We have a bunch of free workshops, including how to optimize your listings. Yeah, some really great stuff over on Freewyld Foundry.
Yeah, so jump on there. So we'll share more about this next week. We're going to dive into Unreasonable Hospitality, which I'm super excited about. We might bring a guest in on this. I didn't tell you this yet, Kaye, but I'll keep that as a surprise. And then revenue mastery, and then operational excellence. And for everyone who's listening, if you guys have any further questions about us building the Freewyld brand and like our philosophy of how we approached it, shoot us an email or DM me on LinkedIn, and we'll either share directly or on the podcast, whatever it is. But love to hear from you guys.